Good evening and welcome to Press Pass. My name is Mark Masai. As we continue with the conversation with my panel that you're about to meet, I'd like you to follow us online with the hashtag Press Pass. Be candid, be real, and let us know what you think as the conversation continues. And yes, we will sample your views as this goes on. This is what we're focusing on tonight.
You are the thief who is trying to show us that, oh, the other thief running away.
Propagandists are so notorious.
This few days has seen a lot of news on corruption. The name of DP Ruto has also featured a lot. Was this coincidence or conspiracy?
About the perception that media is shaping the narrative that DP is corrupt, I can say it's true.
It is not actually so much about the media, it's so much about our politicians.
Well, we also hear from the public whether they think media has a role in an increased correlation of corruption cases and the deputy president. Welcome once again, and to my guest tonight, I'm pleased to be joined by Koki Ocheng. She is a lecturer of journalism and communication at USIU, and next to her, she is also joined by Dr. Alex Awiti. He is the founder and director of the East Africa Institute of the Aga Khan University, and next to him is someone who's been at this very organization, but in the legal fraternity. That is Oliver Kipchumba. He is an advocate to the High Court, and next to him is our very own veteran journalist, Macharia Gaido. And I think he is still healing from last night's game. I'm sure he was watching, and I'm glad he agreed to come on, even though they were defeated by Arsenal. I had to say that. Forgive me, but I had to say that. Now, we will start, although, on a very sad note, as the world mourns the loss of 157 passengers and crew aboard the ill-fated Ethiopian Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 8. The Kenyan media fraternity is also mourning their own journalist, Tony Ngare. Tony is remembered as an ardent advocate for press freedom and safety of journalists in Kenya. He most recently worked at the Kenya National Commission for UNESCO. Now, following the accident, and this is just what's latest, Ethiopian Airlines has grounded its Boeing 737 MAX 8 fleet until further notice, a day after a crash killed the 157 people. 32 of them were Kenyan. And this, of course, according to the airline's regional manager, the grounding of the fleet did not mean that the incident was related with defects on the specific fleet, but a safety precaution. The flight crashed minutes after takeoff on Sunday, killing all 157 people on board. This was the second disaster in 5 months involving a Boeing 737 MAX 8. Aviation regulators in China and Indonesia have also suspended flights using that model. The investigations are continuing, and we'd like to say our condolences to the friends and families of those who have been lost in this tragic incident. I'll start with Koki. You knew Tony well, personally, in fact. I'll give you the first opportunity.
Yeah, Tony was my classmate in the School of Journalism master's class year 2003 to 2006. We were in the same class. We, shared a lot in terms of content, in terms of what to do. But what I remember about him, he was very enthusiastic about getting into the media, yes, and telling stories. And as I was telling you earlier, he actually got straight into the media and disappeared into the media, and we never really got to see him. So the next time I saw him, I think he had moved to the organization you're talking about. He was enthusiastic. He was very focused on reporting issues that mattered to him, and it's such a great loss to the alumni who had, we had a gathering 2 weeks ago, yes, and we really feel the impact. May he rest in peace, and may his family find consolation.
Poleni sana. And to you, Dr. Awiti, give you an opportunity.
Yeah, this is truly tragic, and I think the outpouring of grief is well deserved. I have lost a very close friend, Professor Pius Adesami, who is a professor at University of Carleton, who was actually coming to Nairobi to have a meeting with me. We were organizing a summer school this year with the students from University of Carleton. But our colleagues from Kenyatta University have also lost two colleagues, Isaac Mwangi and Agnes Gadumbi, who were tremendous scholars. So this nation is poorer for their loss. So we hope that we'll get to the bottom of this, and that it is not a systematic technical problem with the Boeing 737 new equipment. We really hope this will be resolved at some point.
Right, Oliver.
I take the opportunity to pay tribute to the 157 people who lost their lives and to console the families of those members, because it is a trying moment when you do not have the very many answers to answer the questions you have. I might not have interacted with Tony the person, but I am a beneficiary of the space he fought for. So for me, Tony and all the 32 Kenyans that lost their lives, I celebrate each one of them for what they did and what they have been doing.
Yes.
May their souls rest in peace.
Macharia, you interacted a bit with Tony in some of the sessions.
Yes, I knew Tony. Tony, we worked closely together in the Kenyan Media Sector Working Group and other initiatives aimed at building capacity for the media, issues of media regulation, issues of media freedom for journalists, media safety. He was a very, very enthusiastic player in that field. Yes. And I think we will all miss him. Yes. Since you're on press pass, I think also we can talk a little about media coverage of this kind of incidents.
Especially the international.
Just this afternoon, I noticed a tweet by AP, and it says Americans, British, French, Australians, Canadians killed in Ethiopian Airlines air crash. They did not mention Kenyans. They did not mention Ethiopians. They did not mention Ugandans and Somalis and Nigerians. You know, that kind of framing tells you something about what kind of world we live in.
Yes.
Now, we're not talking about, let's say, a Canadian newspaper which might focus on Canadians. AP is supposed to be an international news agency covering the whole world.
Yes.
And surely they should be sensitive to those things. Kenya had the biggest number of losses, not a single mention.
Right.
Already there's a write-up in the Atlantic, actually, already looking at the way Western media is covering this air crash from a very Western perspective, only looking at their own citizens and completely ignoring that other people died, and also already trying to make some comments that it must be something to do with Africans and their bad infrastructure and bad airlines and bad this and that. You know, already you can see that kind of framing going on in the Western media.
Right. And that article you say here is by Hannah Georges, The Western Erasure of African Tragedy. In fact, I saw it when you shared it in the group. And part of it says, in the aftermath of the tragedy, many Western media outlets reported the news with unevenly rationed compassion. Some stoked unfounded suspicions about the caliber of the airline itself. Others stripped their reporting of emphasis on Africa almost entirely, framing the tragedy chiefly in terms of its impact on non-African passengers and organizations. I don't know if we have a comment on this from either one of you, if you may, based on this observation.
You know, I think this is really unfortunate, because one of the things that is coming out very clearly is how Boeing basically went through the approval processes to get this airline approved by the Federal Aviation Authority in the United States. You know, there were some very clear technical modifications which would have warranted new training of pilots, etc., which was ignored. So I don't understand why they would now try to kind of cast aspersions on the capability of Ethiopian Airlines as an operator of such a large fleet of aircraft.
Right.
And this plane is just about 5 months old. So I think that just speaks volumes about how they think of people who look like us.
Is that the condescending view from Western
no,
media?
I just think from a PR perspective, you have to find a way out of any situation. And basically not, you know, we had that debate just before I came here with my students. I told them it's not about loss of life, it's reputation. And for an organization like Boeing, really having many of its planes put off the air is a concern. And therefore, they would like to look for any other reason to you know, to justify what happened. But I think just to add on the reporting of tragedy in Africa, I mean, we now as Africans should be used to the idea that we are really the black, you know, dark continent, and get used to it. Because no matter
but
how...
not accept it.
Not accept it, just get used to it, but not accept it. But no matter what incident, be it Dusit, be it Westgate, be it, you know, whatever is happening in the wars, whatever it is, there is always that blackout of the human, the black human life.
Right.
And it is our honors to really shout out and make it very clear that we are not to be taken for granted. I think what happened with this Dusit sent a great message to the West, and I could see that the person who wrote that article was actually transferred and could no longer fit in the space. So again, this thing of taking things lying down is an era long gone.
Right.
We're in the global era where we should assert ourselves, and if the West doesn't feel like reporting us, well and good.
Yeah. And then there's the issue of numbers. I mean, someone here is correcting me as we move on. Aristotle says, hey, Mark, it's 33 Kenyans lost their lives in the fatal crash, not 32 crew and the pilot. Well, it's not really about, that's the other thing that comes out, you know, how many people were there. There's one too many that we lost, and the point is that we would like to pay our respect to the people who passed away, whether Kenyan or otherwise from international countries. We'd just like to say polit to the family, and this is a story that we will keep following and do so respectfully and sensitively. Now, to the focus of the day, we heard a few voices there from the public, whether they think the media is to blame for shaping perceptions around the Deputy President William Ruto in relation to corruption. This past week, actually the last 2 weeks, we've had a lot of focus on the dam scam. And I'm not cussing, I'm not you know, swearing. This is about the dams. And we know the figures. It's been 21 billion. Then there's the argument whether it's 21 or 7 billion. This is how it played out, especially from the governor's conference in Kirinyaga.
I want to think that it is not actually so much about the media. It's so much about our politicians who will want to create a narrative and make sure that they sell it to common mwananchi, unsuspecting common mwananchi, and make it appear as if it is the truth.
Media haishape kwa sababu ni vizuri kusema hivi kwamba ni wewe mwenyewe ama ni watu wako ambao wako karibu yako ndio wanaweza kukujenga ama kukuharibu, kwa sababu kila wakati watu wakisimama karibu na wewe wanasema kabila yetu imeharibiwa ama kabila yetu inakuwa ni corrupt.
About the perception that media is shaping the narrative that DP is corrupt, I can say it's true, media is doing so, and okay, media has find it DP being a big political brand. Media has found it fashionable using corrupt, so that at least it can maybe attract viewers basing on the brand the DP is holding in the current political situation.
Waandishi wa habari wako sawa sawa na mimi kama mkaaji wa Elgeyo Marakwet County, na waomba Wakenya wenzangu tuunge waandishi wa habari mkono, wafanye kazi yao vilivyo, ndio hii Kenya ikue sawa sawa.
Saa zingine unatumia waandishi wa habari kusema kitu mzuri, lakini tunaambia waandishi wa habari waendelee wafanye kazi yao. Hawakulalia, wako na right ya kufanya kazi yao. Mimi naambia wakaji wa Elgeyo Marakwet tu support waandishi wa habari.
Na kusema kweli, tukiangalia venye media imekuwa kimwangazia sana Bwana Ruto, kwa upande wangu na maoni yangu nasema kwamba wanamlemea sana kwa upande wake, kwa sababu hata yeye baada ya kuhojiwa anasema kuwa mambo yote yanayoshutumiwa kuwa si ya kweli. Unaona,
kila mtu ako na opinion yake, lakini kama tunavyoona anafinyiliwa zaidi, lakini ilikuwa tunafaa tumpe time ili ajionyeshe kuwa yeye is the right leader for Kenya.
Just some views as they were playing out. Let's get what people were writing down. I see Koki Ocheng was writing some of the notes there, and Dr. Alex was laughing a bit as the responses were going out. Just get quick responses from the panel.
Conflict frames always sell. Media is clever in that way.
Yeah.
You want to create a situation where there is a lot of adversary relationships between people who are seen to be, you know, on top of the helm of issues in the country, and who drive what we call the dominant narrative.
Yes.
Like they say, that politicians would like to drive the dominant narrative. But the essence of all these adversary frames is more or less to distract people from understanding what the root causes of all these issues are. I think back in the 90s, corruption was just a small little tiny thing we never really understood or interrogated. Mm-hmm. It never translated to dollars or billions, or, you know, it never had a monetary value. It was just kitu kidogo. But today, when people start, pronouncing the amounts of money and using statements like only several billions were used, then we begin to see how serious the issue is.
Okay.
It used to be faceless, but today it has a face, whether it is perception-wise or whether it is true or not. But the way we've talked about corruption gives it a constant context that people begin to question really what's going on.
All right. Dr. Awiti?
Well, I think the reason why I was smiling is that the issues are as complex as the views that are expressed by the folks who were interviewed. But I think it also points to one thing. I guess it's what is truth, where does truth lie, who tells the truth, and whose truth is it? Mm-hmm. And a critical part of that is maybe the press coverage, the depth, the level of investigation, and how we surface these issues, and the conversation that we create around these issues. But also, we also have to understand that no matter how much capability we suggest is now available to the Director of Public Prosecutions or the DCI, it looks like we still don't have the ability to get to the bottom of these issues and actually puzzle them out in a way that citizens can understand and that accountability can be appropriated.
Okay.
So all of these things kind of just fly around, and people go into overdrive with speculations and rumors and all those kinds of things. So I guess the question is, what can we do as media houses and as public intellectuals to basically excavate these issues and make them much clearer? I guess the amount of information that we have is also limited to the extent that investigations are never complete or finalized. We've got cases of corruption, dating from Karen. The Golden Bag was never finalized. The NYS 1 and 2 have never been finalized. So at the end of the day, culpability is never really apparent with regard to these colossal losses of huge sums of money.
So in terms of following these stories through, we never get to the bottom of it?
We never get to the bottom of these things. Nobody has been prosecuted, in my opinion, who is directly involved with these things.
Yeah, and there's a prosecution part, but in terms of us following up on it.
But there's a public opinion.
Yes.
But I guess part of it is also the limits to what the media can do in terms of its capability to investigate these stories. Because all the information that you may have access to is probably stuff that you've been given in confidence, and it's leaks and all of this stuff. And it becomes very difficult to come out upfront and basically say that these things are trusted sources.
Right.
So to the extent that we have lapses and incapacity in the criminal justice system, then citizens resort to rumors, and then perceptions get framed in different kinds of ways, and therefore certain politicians are perceived to be associated with corruption, and many of the political suckers that we see playing out in places like the Devolution conference.
Yes, and we'll get to that. We'll just play a snippet of what played out there. I'd want to get your initial reactions in terms of the shaping of perceptions.
I think we need to go back to the traditional role of the media. The media has a role to set the agenda, to make sure that, to sustain the narrative that is outside there. And these, we have to ask ourselves, so far in this fight against corruption, what role has the media played out? The media is supposed to tell us the story behind the story. The media should not regurgitate or act like a conveyor belt. When a story is leaked to the media ought to investigate. When they say 14 billion has been lost, the first question an investigative journalist should ask.
You reviewed the numbers there. It was actually initially 21.
No, I'm just,
okay, this is just an example. Okay.
Yeah, let's say,
it's been a sticky
let's
issue,
say 80 billion has been lost, or 14 billion for the case of Ketraco. An investigative journalist should get down and ask himself or herself, how much budget was this department given? How much donor funding is there? You see, so that tomorrow, when the case ends up in court, you do not have a charge sheet that will read that the person is being charged of 200 million. The public will ask, where did the other amount go to? The other thing is this, the media should not be caught up in a trap whereby politicians will always be fighting certain narratives. What we are seeing now is that the media has been caught up in a situation where it is helping pursue a certain narrative, the narrative of political conditioning, whereby you want to condition the nation that when tomorrow you talk about corruption, what comes in the mind of everybody is William Ruto. Or when you talk about Moganga, what comes to the mind of everybody is Raila Odinga. We need to go past that. When my fear as a Kenyan has always been, when you see the DCI and the media speaking the same voice, I have problems. Why? Not that that consonant should not be there, but a lot will go undetected. Okay. Look at a case in example. A case in point is this. When DCI comes out and says we found money, or somebody bought towels and what have you, the media should tell us who is this person and how did this, because if all this information is in the public, the media is supposed to help the public consume the information and have an informed judgment. The media should meet the public at the middle, so that the public does not have to deal with the complex words that are given by the DPP and the DCI, but break it down. Okay. Recently, just to wind it up, we were told that the DPP, after the Rotich 36-hour grilling, came out and said that there are complexities in investigating these things. But we haven't seen the media break down the complexities. The media just reported what the DPP talked about, that there are complexities. We ought to have seen a media house going down to explain what are these complexities, so that as the Kenyans go home, they know what we talk about.
In this ongoing investigation, you would expect that? Yes. The details to come out?
Yes.
At
so
the stage?
Yes. And then the other thing, not even the details, tell us when we talk about EPCF contracts, what are they? Break it down for Kenyans. That one is not about even the case in other issues that will happen.
Okay. Let's get thoughts from someone I would consider being part of the traditional media, if you call it that.
I agree with him to a certain extent. But first, the issue of William Ruto. I don't think the media or any other institution, or the investigators for that matter, brought Ruto into this debate. He brought it in himself. He volunteered the information. He came out without any prompting, without being mentioned anywhere, and started defending those dams. And then his henchmen and acolytes went all over the place in public saying this is a campaign against Ruto. They had not been mentioned anywhere. So that he can only blame himself for that. Okay. Either he got excited on the microphone, or bad advice from his media handlers. Yes. But you know, that thing of talking about it's only 7 billion, a terrible way of framing the thing. Yes. Because the ordinary person misunderstood it. That this guy is saying it was not 21 billion stolen, but 7 billion stolen. And it is not what he said, yes, but that was the way it was framed. And it becomes, even if it is 7 billion, that is still a hell of a lot of money. Right. Okay. But now, Ruto aside, the politicization of the whole thing, I don't think it is the media. My problem is when the media, and when I say the media, I don't mean you and you and you out there. I mean us. Yes. Allow ourselves to be used as a propaganda tool by the DCI. Every day we are getting very juicy stories of investigations. Fantastic amounts of 8 billion, 20 billion, this and that. When people go to court, none of those billions are there. We're getting very juicy details on whether it's not even just corruption, even some other crimes we have, which have been high-profile crimes in the past. Yes. We're told about ironclad evidence and all this and all that. This person will be charged with this. Either they are not charged, or they're charged on grounds that cannot stick and have no relationship to what we have been headlining. Mm-hmm. Now, we are being used by the DCI. I don't know for what reason, but should we allow ourselves to be used? Should we interrogate every leak? Because most of them are leaks. Leave alone the official statements, which are mostly from the DPP, which also need to be interrogated. We're getting a lot of digs from Karura Forest, and a lot of it does not stand up to scrutiny, and a lot of that is never presented in court. So we are exposing ourselves. Okay. And I think as a responsible media, we need to be very careful of those leaks.
All right, and that's a source in handling of sources, and you teach the students every day on how to handle these sources and take their information to relate to the public.
Okay. One thing the media has to realize is that people are now very clever on how to capture your attention. they know what to do so that the media pays attention to them. Like he says, getting leaks and then we run with the leak. We don't have time to investigate. We need a story. We need to churn it out fast enough. And this idea is entrenched in what we call media logic, where now the players know your script. They know that the media will come here and pay attention to what we are saying, and then we will act accordingly. All right. For example, we will give them leaks. They will take the leak as it is, and then we'll make it so sensational, add a few names here and there, add some things, make it so amorphous, and the media will report the story. Right. So that's one of the things, and it's actually an area of study, mediatization, where I as a player know if I want to get attention today, these are the steps I'll undertake, you know, to get media attention. I always tell my students, if you want to be famous today, even here in this class, just to do something crazy, put it on social media and you'll be famous. Right. And that's how media is a response.
But it doesn't go to discredit the information that we're getting.
It doesn't go to discredit, but then again, media has the responsibility to look for other sources. Media has the responsibility to isolate facts from, you know, you have that responsibility. Right. You have the responsibility to take time to understand whether whatever perceptions you're creating are based on facts, because we are here to report the truth, or so we say. And therefore, if we just jump on the bandwagon and position some criminal justice officers to appear as if they are doing their work, to elevate that they are doing their work at the expense of our trade, where we have to verify, we have to have sources, we have to make sure that by the time the story is going out, we have the facts and we've gone to the bottom of it.
Dr. Awiti, really quick, because this is an issue here we need to interrogate further after the break, but really quick, are we falling into a trap from what is being brought up here?
I think you know, what Gaido is saying is really spot on. I think this has to go to court. Sensationalization of these corruption cases seems to me to look like the DCI and the DPP are responding to the pressure that the president is exerting on them. And numerous times President Kenyatta has gone on record basically to say, what do you expect me to do? I don't do the investigation, I don't prosecute, I don't rule on this on the evidence that is presented. But having said that, I want to say that what I have deep suspicion of is our capability as a country to deploy the right amount of resources and assets to investigate these cases. We are not very good at following the money and understanding the financial trail that these things always leave behind, that are always very clear. Okay. But it's very difficult for us to say what bank account, who was involved, who paid what. Even the register of companies, for instance, it's always just a very murky area. It's very difficult for us to basically find out the companies that did any tenders or purchased or supplied goods and equipment to the government. And I think that's where Koki's point comes in. Where is our capability in the media houses? Is it a lack of resources? Is it a lack of training to basically go after this and methodically investigate these cases? So for instance, that dam question, I think there are many, many dimensions of investigation that we've basically ignored. For instance, the capacity that is claimed that the dam would have, is that even physically possible, given the amount of rain and water that is available in those landscapes, for instance? That becomes question number one. Who did the feasibility and all of that? So there's capability trucks and trails all the way, but we don't go to those things. I guess because it takes time, it is a tough job to do, and it doesn't sell as a headline story. Yes. It is the day two news. So how do we featureize stories after we break them day two? And I think that's where we come short as journalists in terms of public education, but also just enabling a more balanced representation of these cases, where individuals like Deputy President Ruto wouldn't then run around claiming that they're being victimized and the corruption investigation is being politicized.
Okay. This we'll need to get into in terms, and we'll use the story of the Error Dam as an example of how it's morphed and changed and where it is right now. and if we've missed or have gone off track in terms of following through this story. And I really wish John Kamau would have been able to join us. He was part of the team that broke this story and doing a good job in following up, and he was not able to join us this evening. But let me just sample a quick view here from Michael Otieka. He says, media is being used to shape a narrative, especially with 2022 coming up. All corruption need be investigated and perpetrators brought to book. As it is, only corruption cases where William Ruto is mentioned is what is being overplayed by our media stations, NHIF, KQ, JKIA take over. So this is just one of the views that people would put out there in terms of what we do. Governor the Dreamer says corruption has reached an unacceptable level. It devours resources that could be devoted to the citizens. It impedes the proper carrying of our market rules and penalizes the honest and capable. And thank God, Juguna, you say the media has always failed when it becomes a partisan of Kenya political arena, the politician vying for political prowess. Thank you for those views. Keep them coming in. We'll be taking a quick break. I'll be back shortly. Who just is coming in from outside of Nairobi might have thought this was what really dominated the conference, though it was for all the 47 counties and tracking the progress so far. What really caught the headlines was the back and forth between the ODM leader Raila Odinga and the Deputy President William Ruto. This is just a snippet of what played out.
If you are talking about the theft of the dams, and figures are there, don't come and tell us that it was not 20 billion, it was only 7. Let the investigation authorities complete the investigations. Who are you to tell us? How did you know? You are the thief who is trying to show us that, oh, the other thief running away.
Ladies and gentlemen, the biggest threat to the war on corruption is selective prosecutions targeting predetermined individuals or projects. And secondly, rumor mongers, propagandists, and peddlers of half-truths, exaggerations, and distortions meant for media headlines to execute covert political schemes, which in and of itself constitute obstruction of justice.
As mentioned, that's just a snippet. And Koki, as a trainer, would you mistake a journalist who comes from this function? In fact, we had Kennedy Mureithi, who was there throughout the week. And on that particular day, when that comment is made, that's his focus, that's his entry point of the story. Would you mistake him?
Yes, first and foremost, devolution is not about the two. I'm sorry to say. It's about the 47 governors and what they've done. So in fact, the journal that has been used to break, tell the story of devolution is not hard news. You can't be talking about what's happening in Migori, Nyatike, I don't know where, with that 2 minutes. We want to know what is happening. So the journal in itself, of course, then blinds us to what really they were talking about in that particular conference. It's a very important conference that Kenyans are interested in. But now, if you just bring us these two these two leaders, and then, place that adversarial kind of discussion in 2 minutes, you've collapsed the whole devolution conference based on them. Okay. So for me, that is a challenge, that when you are preparing to report on this devolution conference, what exactly is the aim of the media? You should be telling me, really, this is what has happened in this area, this is what has happened. We need facts about what's going on so that we can hold the governors accountable, know whether we are progressing, whether our constitution is progressive, like we said. Those are the things that should interest us today.
Macharia, from your background, this is a story that you've been tasked, or you've tasked someone to go and get. What would you tell them to come back with? Would you be disappointed if they came back with that headliner?
Sometimes it is a reality of the newsroom that sometimes what may seem like a sideshow is the story. It was a devolution conference, yes, but if the DP preferred to talk about other things, and the ODM leader preferred to talk about other things beyond devolution, those might be probably were more, at that particular time, juicier in terms of news than conferencing. But like I said again, it is not us, it is not the media framing it that way. It is the politicians framing it that way. It is Mr. Ruto framing it that way, and Mr. Odinga framing it that way. And let us not forget, Mr. Ruto is the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. The DPP and the DCI, even if they're independent offices, are his juniors. Now, they are there doing the work which they were employed to do as government officers. He goes to a conference and starts rubbishing what they're doing and calling it up some predetermined or whatever, saying it is an a political witch hunt or that kind of stuff. We can't ignore that. Today he's the deputy president. He is here rubbishing the work of his juniors. What if he became the president? Would he sack them? Right. We're having that same, it's a problem here. We're seeing it as a problem in the US where President Trump is under investigation and every day wants to sack the special counsel but cannot do it because it would be too politically sensitive. Right. If you're in a position of authority, you cannot hold yourself above the law or above investigations.
Okay. Any problem with the framing that you perhaps saw and what played out from last week?
Yes, I will have a problem because when you go by the term a devolution conference, it is a conference whereby Kenyans have paid top dollar to be held there. Although it is, in my other terms, I'll say it is an incest where governors call each other to look at what they have done. But be it as it may, there are Kenyans who have paid for those people to be there. There are delegations that have been transported from Homa Bay to come all the way to Kirinyaga. You cannot come out instead of telling us what was the report. After the 3 days event, there was a document that came out of there. We need to be asking ourselves, what was the thinking of the governors in terms of the low absorption rate of funds? What was their thinking in terms of the health crisis we are as a nation? We would have expected that is why it would have been solved. But because media houses are also in business, they will want to do that which will be commercially viable. Okay. And which is the problem now in terms of what is their role. And the second thing, in the dual, if you are a visitor in this country, you will think the Deputy President and Raila Odinga camped in Kirinyaga for the whole 3 days discussing whatever they were discussing. But that is not the right thing. The right thing ought to have been, if I am not a journalist, but the little knowledge I have about journalism is, if I had sent somebody there, I would have expected several reports in the auto queue so that I know in terms of the real devolution, this was that. This is what was discussed. Yes. But lastly, we must run away and disabuse the notion that when you criticize positively the DCI and the DPP, you are against the war on corruption. I think that one is falling into the trap of politics of corruption also. Because look at it this way, there is always duality in terms of everybody who's in an office. Because first, you have your rights as a citizen, and then there is the office. As much as the Deputy President is the Deputy President, but he remains a citizen of this republic and a taxpayer. He cannot be pigeonholed not to say whatever he thinks about. There are several days when the President has vented out his frustrations about certain officers. When he said, "Munataka nifanye nini?" that was Uhuru Kenyatta, the citizen. Right. And those are the things that we must now live with under the Constitution 2010, that those are independent offices and we are allowed to criticize them. The media falls in that trap by looking at everybody who criticizes the DCI and the DPP. They do not go deep and ask, where is this criticism coming from? They just ask, they take the base value.
Real quick, Masai, and then I'll give
now,
Dr.
first of all, the fact that Mr. Odinga and Dr. Ruto got the lion's share of coverage does not mean that the devolution conference was not covered. Yes. It was, but maybe it didn't attract your attention because it was not as interesting as what these two are saying. Secondly, in government, there's something called collective responsibility. I think if you are in government, whether you're a cabinet secretary or other high office or a PS or a president or a deputy president, yes, you cannot go and sit in the cabinet and decide on a certain course of action. Let us fight corruption. And then you go out there to the public platform and start rubbishing that fight. As simple as that. I think you have to be part of it. Or, you know, as simple as that. If you have a problem with it, in that it is not being fought very well or efficiently, yes, you can raise it within the right framing, but not turn it into a political fight where you say they are targeting me, or they're targeting my people, or my, you know, this thing of hiding behind some community. Yes. Our people are being finished, that kind of framing. Yes. I heard somebody else saying that they are finishing pastoralists. You know, I think we should grow up from that kind of
but there's a danger of feeding these
defense mechanism.
The framing. Dr. Owiti, I don't know if you agree with what Zeus says. He's actually called Alex Owiti. He says devolution. This is a coincidence. I just picked it up. Devolution conference was not audited properly. It was turned into a political fiasco of dominance between Rao and the DP, as well as you follow the reactions that were given here.
I think, Mark, this was completely staged inappropriate. The remarks by Deputy President William Ruto were clearly prepared. Mr. Odinga was probably just talking off the cuff. But again, I think it's an indictment on the structure of our public discourse, where politicians use this kinds of platform when they know they have public attention to address personal grievance. I think that whole segment of Deputy President Ruto's speech that was played out was basically about him trying to set the record right and say that this is personal and that we have not exerted sufficient professionalism in the way that we conduct public investigations around corruption cases, and also lambasting the DCI and the Deputy Public Prosecutor. For instance, I think, in my view, to agree with Gaido, is abdication of collective responsibility. And as Gaido said, these are his juniors in government. They are more appropriate platforms and opportunities for him to address these kinds of issues. But to bring this out and troll these people in public basically undermines public confidence in our institutions. And these are things that we've struggled for many years to try and build. And every time we try to do them, when any politician falls afoul of the law, the first thing they do is to lambast and demonize or criminalize public servants who are basically just trying to work as best as they can. So I think when we look at the general sweep of these things, you sort of ask yourself the question, why do we necessarily have politicians headlining these events? Of course, you can't get them on a script. Even if you do, they'll still get onto the side and talk about other things. Yes. So I guess also the discipline that we bring to public conversations. Honestly, if Raila Odinga finds the time to travel from Nairobi, leave everything else that he's doing, just to go to Kirinyaga to call Deputy President Ruto a thief, I think that's just insanitary language in public discourse. Yes. For Deputy President Ruto to also take his time and get his speechwriters to write exactly what he read, I think is also, in my view, especially troubling.
Okay, and let me put it to you, because you're training the students who are coming into the newsroom now, and things have changed from when I was in class. And right now, for instance, you're sent to the Devolution conference, and you come back, you focused on the proper speech, and you've not gone into what the ad-libs that they go into after the juicy parts. And for instance, from NTV, KTN have their own story, and it leads with what Ruto said in response to what Raila said. And I'm leading with what, the issue of resources to the devolved units. What do you think will happen to me practically with my editor seeing this happen? And I was there. And then there's someone who has a mobile phone. Won't they think that we are trying to hide what was said there?
Before you go very far, I think the learned friend had a point about if public institutions are being questioned ethically, the media has the right to look into it.
Okay.
If people are throwing aspersions to the way some officers are working and what they are doing, I think the media, because again, you have a social responsibility to be able to cover, yes, that sensational story, to be able to cover aspersions on public officers, not to drive the narrative that these officers are just being used, they are holier than thou, and therefore we shouldn't touch them. No. I think there is a way the media should be able to follow through if these officers are asked. Now, I want to believe that editors don't come from the same school, unless you want to argue that they have a conference at night and agree.
Well, with the musical chairs,
yes, this is all we are going to say.
Okay.
I would want to believe that because they're highly qualified journalists first.
Yes.
They're people who've been in the media as long enough. And I've seen attempts by media houses like Nation newspaper now, to actually tell stories from a deeper perspective and a different perspective. You've even changed your requirements for jobs for people to get into the media house. So content is key. We are going to an era where we don't want to switch on channels and just hear the same thing.
Okay.
How you tell that story of whatever you perceive is boring, that the whole thing that I want to know about the devolution is to make it as interesting as possible, or to make it as visible as possible, to make it as interactive as possible. Might be more interesting for me, if I'm an opinion leader, to pass it down to the other people who listen to my opinions, than it might be just to hear, okay, so and so and so and so are in this conflict of words. Because again, these are people, politicians are friends. Adversaries in the daytime, friends in the night, and we know that. So driving that narrative again is kind of old-fashioned.
Okay.
Yeah, Kenyans are really exhausted with that.
All right, but Macharia, in the newsroom again, how would it play out? I've come back and the editor has seen this clip where Ruto is responding to Raila, but my headline and my story is totally different, practically.
I think you would be endangered, an endangered species.
Yes, yes.
There's a story told of a reporter who was sent to interview somebody somewhere in downtown Nairobi. And he went, he finally came back without a story. And he was asked, what happened? Where's the story? And he says, no, there was no story. Why? Because the building burnt down. So I didn't find the guy I was looking for. You know, as simple as that.
Yes.
Something burnt in Kirinyaga, the fact that it is not what you were sent for, but it happened, you do it.
And follow through with it.
Yes.
Come back with a story. So we'll be getting back to a bit more of that just to conclude this, the narratives around corruption. But there's also the narratives around the handshake as well as the Building Bridges initiative. There was also this interview with the Raila Odinga, and there was the questions that were put to him. And I know you know this one very well. You posted it. And the responses that were there on whether media is really following through with this journey of the Building Bridges initiative and the handshake, and whether we're staying the course or getting caught up in the politics of it all. Stay with us. I'm not sure we can conclude this issue on the Aror Dam and the story and how it was managed and how it is actually developing. But we would want to get some final comments on this before we get into Handshake and BBI and try to do that within the time that we have. And as the story broke, the initial figure was 21 billion, for a thicket. We've been told this was for a thicket that was meant to be a dam in Elgeyo Marakwet. And when you have, there's of course someone who leaked the information to inform this story, and you have this information which is privileged. How should you handle it first? Because you don't want anyone else to get the information before you can put it out. It's privileged. You have an edge over the other person. So we leaked it. I mean, we put it out there. We headlined it. Is there anything wrong in going with what your source has given you? And I'm sure John Kamau and the team did their research before going out and just going big with it. Sometimes you have these reports over months before you actually go to print.
Like I said, it is important to interrogate every bit of information, whoever it is coming from, whether it is the National Intelligence Service, whether it is the DCI, whether it is the DPP, whether it is the minister for this or the minister for that. You have to think, why is this person giving me this information? Is he doing it in the public good, in the public interest, or because he has another interest? Interrogate that information before going to press.
Yes.
Or you may want also to consult experts and find out, there's so much that can be done. It might delay publication, but then you will come up with a better, more rounded, more credible story.
But in this case, even if there are questions about the figure, in this case, how the story was treated, do you see any loose ends? Because they did their research before they put it out.
What I am seeing, and the questions that are now being raised, is that a lot of the story was based on information that cannot hold up, or that was erroneous. I'm not saying it is fake,
right?
But maybe exaggerated, or maybe in a situation where the people investigating did not understand the mechanics involved. Maybe it was a police corporal dealing with somebody which should be dealt with by a hydrological engineer, something like that. And that is what I was saying earlier on, that we are getting a lot of tips. We're breaking a lot of stories with fantastic figures and fantastic details and very juicy details. But when they actually go to court, none of that is there. You told 8 billion was lost here.
Yes.
When they go to court, it is 400 million. I'm not saying 400 million is not a small, is not a big figure. It does not matter. But still, that raises a question.
Right. In how it, I mean, and you've mentioned the court. It gets to him. He gets the figures that are presented in court as an advocate in terms of
I think
who he's defending.
I think going forward, we really have to strengthen the investigative capacity in our newsrooms. Traditionally, we have had the crime reporter. I think now we need to have a couple of lawyers, forensic auditors, engineers and hydrologists and geologists and all other experts that we can call on when we need them. But just to get a story from one source and probably without subjecting it to interrogation, go with it. It is dangerous and it exposes us.
But not necessarily the case that this is not what.
No, I'm not speaking about this specific case.
Yes.
I am looking at, I think over the last nearly 1 year, we've had a lot of corruption cases and even some major crime cases, murders, crimes of passion, and so on and so forth. And we get all these juicy details from the police. But when it comes to court, you find that either they don't have evidence or it is very weak.
Right. The loose ends that you saw as we wrap this up.
I think the major issue that also we have to grapple with as a nation and you people as an industry is the issue of piecemeal information. It fuels propaganda. Today you get this information, tomorrow you get this. Over time, somebody will think there is some choreography going on. Because look at it this way, with the issue of Aror Dam, there are several things that the media has not come out to help the public understand. For example, when we say that there was a 7.8 billion paid, we know it's a huge amount of money, but nobody is explaining to the public why was this money paid to mobilization, what is mobilization and advance payment, what does it mean? Again, nobody is explaining to the public that when you pay an insurance sum of 11 billion, you have borrowed around 43 billion and you are insured with 11 billion. Is it making sense? It's like you borrow somebody 100 million and you insure it with 30 million. Where is the sense? Those are the kind of questions I would have expected a media house to come out and explain to the public that the devil is in the detail. These small things, how do we have a deal that we send Kenyans and highly paid Kenyans to Italy to go and negotiate, and we are paying insurance for 11 billion? Those are the questions. The other question will have been this: what were we paying for? Were we paying for the designs? Were we paying for whatever we were paying for? But again, I understand, when you get a normal policeman to investigate an HPP project, these are the things you have to ask yourself. And we now need to put the media on toes, because some of these things, as Gaitho has captured it, some of them cannot stand in a court of law. Courts of law are courts of evidence. Okay. They are courts of records. You do not take their things just because they are juicy.
Yes, but this doesn't write off this story in terms of we're onto something.
No. You know,
little wonder the reactions that we're getting.
What we must also give the media is it has grown bold over time. That one we must give it. We can't deny them that one.
And credible.
But the
Not
issue
just
is,
bold,
yes,
and credible.
The issue is what Gaitho is talking about, the media falling into a choreography, a choreographed kind of a narrative whereby we want to fix Mark. But what do? We start by fixing his sister, and then we go to the brother, and then we go to the in-law.
Disclaimer.
Have you been misquoted?
I have absolutely not said about fixing any persons or any
No.
individuals.
I was talking about it.
Please don't put words in my mouth. Those people who say they are being fixed are the ones who are fixing themselves.
Yes.
I think they're the ones who are inserting their own names,
exactly,
and their own brothers and their own communities into the story.
I was addressing the issue of going into a narrative. That is where you leave the media in the doorsteps of some
Little wonder the reactions that we're getting, Dr. Awiti. I mean, we're onto something here. We might need clarification of the details of the numbers, but there's something here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Mark, this is a quintessential trap. While we're now extremely capable of breaking news,
right,
we are not very good at day 2 news, featurizing, going to the depth and verifying all of the things that we're told. You know, it's trust but verify. So I always think about the media and academia as the two institutions that are at the heart of truth and fact production. In an era where we are drowning in information but suffocating in half-truths, there's a lot of information. Like, for instance, this Aurora Dam. There's everything that people would want to know about it. The question is, which parts of it are actually important, well investigated, that can actually inform the public discourse about corruption.
Yes.
You know, let's not forget that this is not just a guru's battle. How do we enjoin the public through education and evidence,
yes,
to support this, but also to begin to see the stakes, as Kipchumba is trying to describe. Ask all the right questions. For instance, what are these international contracts, and what does mobilization mean? What does insurance for a dam that is not even built means? So I think that what we need to think about is what are the inadequacies in the current structure of media reporting and media capability. The other side of the conversation should also go to the capability of police and investigating arms of our country. Mm-hmm. We all know that our policemen are basically everybody else who never made it to university, shows up in Kiganju, train for 6 months, they come out here and then go and do whatever they do. They're not very well trained. Mm-hmm. 6 months is not enough for them to be able to deal with the complex details of 21st century crime and fraud. So sometimes we also expect too much out of them. I don't even think that post-Kiganju training is sufficient enough and robust in ways that will prepare them to do these very complex investigations and to begin to kind of tangle with brilliant lawyers like Kipchumba in court. When you bundle 19 people in one charge sheet, including a farmer and a permanent secretary, what do you expect to be the outcome? It's going to be thrown out of court. So I think we need to think about these 3 elements. One is investigation, from the police side, but also good reporting and good journalism. We have to go back to the heart of the craft of journalism.
Okay.
It is fact-based, it is cross-checked, and it is informative, and it is at depth. Then the other one is, how do we enjoin the public in this fight against corruption by ensuring that they have the right information to then ask the right questions? I think at a certain point, the media should also stop being activist. Present the facts as you can, and then let the public continue the debate and make the conclusions that they have to, and also hold the people that they have to hold accountable.
Koki, in our defense, I would say in this story, it's developing.
For how
are
long?
Changing. It's developing. It's out there. It's out there for, you know, the
Media
jury.
accountability frameworks allow media to take whichever role they want to take at a given time in space. If you want to, like, advocate, be an activist for that matter for this particular issue, to collaborate with government if it is another issue, to mediate. There are four ribs, I just don't remember all of them, and we kind of like tend to move around those things depending on the issue.
Okay.
I agree with all that people are saying in terms of public support, you know, public support to understand or to raise consciousness of how corruption is interfering with our day-to-day lives. But one of the things I would challenge here is to say that government officers, especially those in the investigative arm and all that, are not qualified. Having been one of those government officers, I can tell you for a fact that they are highly trained, even if it appears that most of them are, might not have qualified, but there are those who are specialized, and those are highly, highly trained. The intelligence in this country is quite robust, so we wouldn't take it from that
and you wouldn't, and then some of this information is coming from the intelligence, so it wouldn't quite water down.
But what I think the media is challenged with, like we said, is my colleagues have said, is okay, perspective. Now that we've broken this story, it's hot, it's new, it's fresh.
And it's getting some even unwarranted reactions.
Yeah, unwarranted reactions. Are we flowing with that unwarrantedness? Are we in the clamor or swimming in that clamor that people are paying attention to us and they're saying we are doing an excellent job? You know, we are doing. Are we getting to the bottom of these issues? He mentioned the kind of contract. Have we interrogated that contract and seen why it is there? Have we interrogated, you know, whether processes and procedures were followed, and if they were violated, then to what extent? The issues of I have a friend who happens to deal a lot in tenders. The idea of mobilization, is it a practice that is acceptable, and what is the purpose? At the end of the day, have we gone to the courts, seen those charge sheets, and questioned why that particular office, which should be charging these people of corruption, is it deliberate that there are 19 people on one charge sheet? Because if it is deliberate, then we know then it's just a conspiracy. We talk about the corrupt issue, then it goes to court and never surfaces, and people are walking around with what they have. So I think those are deliberate questions the media needs to ask.
And as I believe is something that we'll pursue. Really quick before I have to give an opportunity.
Mark, one thing also that we must add is that, adding from what our good teacher is talking about, is whenever the story has broken out and we have run the story, notwithstanding the time it will develop, there are things that the media must follow. How come somebody turned from being a suspect to a state witness? Explain it to the public. How comes in this ministry it is Rotich writing the statement and not the PS? Explain to the public. How comes the story, let's say take for example Ruaraka land, it has taken corners. What is happening? The media should illuminate in those corners so that we can carry the public along in this fight against corruption, because remember, the fight belongs to the public, not the media.
All right. Now to the issue of BBI and Handshake, and it's unfortunate it's taking the last few minutes of the show and not having good time. Perhaps it's something that we should sequel and continue coverage on. But this is something you posted, Macharia, and this was in a question, a one-on-one with Raila, I believe, in the sense, I don't know if it was just written or back and forth. And this is a part, you'll explain. This is just a part where you questioned, or it's questioned about the Building Bridges Initiative. And it's placed here in dark. This is a question has largely been conducted behind closed doors, leaving the public unsure of what exactly is going on. So in response to this, he says the BBI is very open. The media has not given it the space, probably because BBI does not lend itself to the combative slash and burn brand of public engagement our media loves and promotes. But it is wrong to say that the BBI is secretive. It has held public hearings in at least 19 counties, and they are moving to Western Kenya this week. I believe right now they're actually at 22 counties. How can a team holding hearings in public places be called secretive? It is the media that are pursuing their own agenda. First, explain the context of this interview, and then,
First of all, it was not the ideal interview.
Yes.
In terms of that, it was not a one-on-one.
Yes.
He was in Mombasa, I was in Nairobi. I sent him questions on email, and he responded on email. But of course, then there's not that opportunity to engage and to ask follow-up questions. Yes, it is true that BBI has been having public hearings. And I think I would also concede here that maybe as the media, we have not covered them adequately. But I think a lot of the public hearings have involved people presenting their written proposals. Maybe they just come and give us a slight intro and present a paper. Now, those papers have not been available. Those guys have no library that I know of where we can access those papers. There is no website I know of where we can accept those, where we can access those papers. So it becomes very difficult for us to be able to give a rounded perspective of what is happening with BBI in terms of the proposals being made. What can we analyze in terms of this region or this party or this grouping is pushing this agenda or these proposals for this makeup of government or government structures and so on. It's almost impossible. Apart from a few guys who come up and make theirs public, most of those things are
very bad, private,
are not being made public.
Yeah.
And I think it should be the role of the BBI Secretariat to make them public and to have a repository where those things can be available for anybody who wants them.
Okay. And because of that, the nature of how it has been working so far, it is now another narrative that the Building Bridges Initiative, much as it has been put out there as, to bring us together as a country after the handshake, it is actually a vehicle to give recommendations for the referendum, and that is the inevitable end that we will get to. And that's what people are thinking now, and the narratives that are being pushed. In really dissecting and opening up this conversation to the public, which is why they are working, the BBI. Do you think we've been doing our job well?
Well, I think as Guido says, the whole Building Bridges initiative is shrouded in a lot of half-truths and half-disclosures in terms of, just like the handshake basically just erupted on the public scene with the handshake outside Harambee House. And that's the first many people heard of it, and that's probably the total sum of what we knew about the fact that now we're on a path of reconciliation and national healing, following Raila's swearing in as a people's president and the acrimonious 2017 elections, etc. So I think, in my view, we have not made deliberate steps to include a broader public discourse around the reason and the need for building public trust and reconciliation around our politics. What we've said is kind of cherry-picked what we think drives this divisive zero-sum game politics, and we say it's the structure of the executive. And therefore, that then predicates the question, what are we going to do about it? And people start talking about we need a constitutional referendum to basically fix that. And this now fuel all kinds of speculation. So I think the immediate conversations after the handshake were the things that kind of derailed and wrong-footed this, what I think is a brilliant initiative. We should have basically gone into how do we learn to live together rather than start to scapegoat and say it is the way we conduct our politics, therefore let's fix it. It is very akin and similar to the conversations that led up to the repeal of, that led up to the promulgation of the new constitution, yes. Where we said that the constitution that we had before the current constitution was wrong. We didn't realize that it's the players and actors in these institutions that actually are problematic, that it doesn't matter what constitution you throw at this country, you still have almost the same outcome. So I think we missed the opportunity to start to dig deeper into the conversations that created, say, 2007, for instance. What are the deep national grievances around this? Is it just the political brinkmanship that we see around our political leaders? Or are there some really critical institutional dysfunctions that basically create the chaotic, discordant politics that we have? And especially around elections, where we can't organize ourselves around issues that we think transcend our ethnic divisions or narrow political interests that are determined by these short-term coalitions that we build. Yeah. So I think that lack of depth in this very important national conversation is, in my view, just mostly disheartening and disingenuous in my view.
Okay, let me throw this to you, Kipchumba, because I mean, initially we're talking about corruption and the connection with Ruto and how wrong it is to fit into that narrative. Then there's now the talk about the handshake and the edging out of Ruto, as well as the talk about and clamor for referendum, which is still in the same line of edging out Ruto in the 2022 succession politics. If indeed there is some truth to it, do you feel that this should be called out by media and put out there, that this is not about you Kenyans, it's about politics and siyasa?
In my own 3 words, I will describe the handshake in what the Shakespeare called it. It is full of sound and fury, which signifies nothing. Look at it this way. The Building Bridges initiative and the handshake, the Building Bridges initiative first, it has not grown past the people who gave birth to it. It has not grown past the shadow of Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. It didn't come out to explain to the public what they mean. At times you cannot blame media for the problems of Building Bridges initiative because you don't know where their secretariat is. They do not publicize their meetings in a newspaper that on Friday we are in Kagumo or we are in Tetu. You see, so those are the things we need to ask ourselves. And again, another thing which now the media ought to have brought it to the front is what are their legal structures? What are their key performance indicators that if today they do this, we expect them? Look at the Building Bridges initiative has fallen trap to the same thing that killed the public trust in the TGRC. There was a lot of secrecy and mysterious nature on which things were done that by the time the product came out, nobody knew what to expect. To the issue of whether the media did the right job in reporting about whether they are edging out William Ruto or not, you need to ask yourself, even in terms of the counties that the Building Bridges has visited, there is a lot of things, there is a lot that leaves, there are questions that will come up when you look at how the spread was. That is the first thing. The second thing is this. When you talk about building bridges, you will expect that this is a national discourse, that first it needs to respect that we have institutions. We have an institution that is charged with integration of this nation, the Ole Kaparo-led institution. Yes. We have parliament, which is the legislative reform arm of government. Right. We have we have anti-corruption, which is charged with fighting corruption. We have DCI, and we have all these other institutions. You need to ask yourself, why did the media allow an amorphous institution to crop up without questioning its legal structures? Without questioning, why are these people consuming exchequer money without a proper legal framework? Yes, they came in as advisors, but was there public participation? As a citizen now, if I go back to my village in Tuyo Bay, do they know that their money is being used to pay 14 men and women who they have no anchorage in law? And then again, whatever that they'll come up with, how will it be different from the Ekuru Okot Punguza Mizigo? there is no true picture that there will be consonance that whatever they'll bring, Parliament will adopt it. And you know, we have used exchequer's money. The people's purse has been used to fund this thing. What if tomorrow in one afternoon, Parliament trashes it? Where will we get our money?
There are many questions there to be asked, and how we ask them as media is also very sensitive, because you'll either be seen to be on this side or that side. First, I'll give Koki an opportunity to respond to this as we wrap it up.
You know, Kenya has depended for many years on legal solutions to social issues, and sometimes interventions. So many interventions.
Yes.
Task force here, task force there. I mean, what is the whole issue? We've thrived on task forces over the years, so I don't see any problem with that. Legal solutions don't have all answers to social problems. So for me, if it is an intervention that intends to, you know, thrash out issues that have brought Kenyans apart, I don't know how it runs. It is it's mysterious in nature. But I think if it's an intervention, just like any other, that will have an impact in how we do our politics and what we think, then I think it's all right, without looking at the legality of it.
Okay.
But for media, you know, media can find out where these public participation forums are. It's not hard, you know, to find out. You just need to follow Raila on Twitter, and you know where he goes.
Right. I mean, that is where the problem is.
There's no problem with that. Yeah, I mean, if you really want to get a story, you'll get it. The other thing is that all public, I've attended a few. They are very interesting forums where there must be somebody rapporteuring, you know, somebody taking down notes, taking down opinions, and journalists can follow through that. If journalists want information to beef up their story on what is happening around, or to collect what has happened in these forums, it's possible. My issue is, and this is an ethical question for media, we stop at, oh, we've done all that we can. Oh, we've done all that we can. Oh, we are limited in resources. But in real sense, if you can depend on a source to tell you whether it is about the dams, I mean, why wouldn't you make effort to look for sources who will give information that really help break down what this initiative is all about?
Yes.
Why is it still shrouded in mystery to date? What is the TOR of that task force, and what does it bring to light? Are we participating in the golden rule of media, that we tell the public what to think and not tell them what to think about? Are we violating that?
Okay.
Yeah, by, you know, like throwing in things and say, okay, now think about this. This is the perspective we are saying. We should be telling them what to think.
Don't you see that happening in editorials and what have you, in conversations?
I mean, how often are editorials thrown in?
Okay.
I think what I would say is, as a media, we do have an agenda-setting role.
Yes.
And I think probably we need to give more resources to covering the BBI hearings. The same kind of resources we gave, for instance, to covering the Bomas conference, you know, the constitutional conference, because that's actually looks like what we're heading to. So it is our responsibility to give it not just blanket coverage, but also extract all the documents we can get as they are being presented, and try and give our viewers, our readers, an indication of what is going on. Secondly, I think we can try and guide the debate. Tell them what to think, or what to think about. Tell them what is happening.
Okay.
I'm looking at it this way. When we were on the new constitution, I think a lot of us in the media came out in support of the new constitution. We recognized that there was a problem that needs to be solved.
Yes.
And we came out in support of the new constitution. But at the same time, we did not just give blanket support, but also try to interrogate the document, point out where there are shortfalls, and so on and so forth, away from the politics, because there's a lot of politics involved in constitution making. Now here, what is dominating about the BBI is the politics and the toing and froing. But if we determine, like she said, that we have a problem that needs to be solved, if we agree that the Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga handshake was good for this nation in terms of reducing political tensions and giving us some predictability in what we are doing, what was the next step? The next step was setting up BBI. Is it going in the right direction? Are we being sidelined into talking about a referendum before we even have a referendum question? Yes. Is simply shifting the governance structure to accommodate prime ministers and deputy prime ministers and deputy assistant prime minister the solution to our national problems, the problems that make us mistrust each other, get into conflicts over the quest for office, fights over resources? Are we really addressing those things just simply by proposing let's have a prime minister? There are so many issues we can be raising and getting people to think about them so that their discourse is not shaped by politicians who want to be prime minister or who want to be president in 2022 or whatever, but by what really is good for this country and what is good for the people of this country. It is a good initiative. It should have been groundbreaking, but I think it has not been managed properly. Okay. And maybe we as the media have not given it the kind of backing it needed.
All right. We're way past our time here, so a few seconds to you as we wrap up. I'll start with you. And then
on the role of the media in terms of fighting graft and the politicization of the graft, I think the media must come back and re-emphasize its place as a place whereby they are supposed to tell the world or the public that which exists. The public should meet the media away from the truth that belong to DCI and the truth that belong to lawyers and the truth that belong to the victims. Tell the truth that is the only truth, so that as the public the discourse continues, the public knows that this is a neutral ground. Okay. But when the media is caught up in the issues of narratives, of fixing who or which presidential candidate or what, we need to ask ourselves, that is where we go wrong. Right. Just one example of why the media has always set up the public in some sort. When the Executive Order number 1 of 2019 came in, there are several questions that the media ought to have asked, but they went unasked. Now we have created a scenario where we have started also conditioning the public that the country can do with a prime minister. Why? Because we failed or neglected.
Is that a narrative?
It is a narrative.
Which were the questions which we should have asked? I'm just curious because maybe I missed them.
No, one of the questions which we ought to have asked was this: is giving all these ministries to one person effective in terms of service delivery? Is it, what are we trying to do when we have these old positions? Are we creating an executive minister?
Just driving prime minister.
Yes. Or are we preparing the public for a prime minister because the position came or was created at the height of the referendum debate?
That sounds like a conspiracy.
If I recall, all those things there were miles and miles and miles of acres and acres and acres of write-ups in all the papers, looking at the creation of that structure or that cabinet committee and what it means, the political implications, the practical implications of I think all these things were well interrogated.
Just not in the tone
maybe
that
you didn't read.
some would want.
No. I read one article.
Yeah.
I thought we were talking about the editorials, because when you read an
editorial,
they come with a certain energy.
There was a lot of write-ups. There was a lot of analysis, especially in the Sunday papers, taking pages and pages and pages.
Yes. So
looking at all those things.
It is being done. But perhaps not in the tone that some people would like to hear.
Maybe that is the problem.
Dr. Awiti, moving forward, there's a BBI. They have a couple of months to go before we have a report. Should we get into our own campaign as media, parallel campaign?
I guess, now let me speak as an interim dean of the Graduate School of Media and Communications at Aga Khan University. So I'm kind of implicitly part of the fold. I think what we need to think about is how do we surface the issues? As Gaido said, what are the issues? How do we frame national discourse? What is important for us? How do we basically structure a national dialogue amongst ourselves. I think this country has missed so many opportunities. 2007 was a teachable moment. 2017 was another teachable moment. We have had this constitution play out with devolution and all of its elements. I think we should go back to ask the fundamental questions. Is this really what the framers of the constitution intended? Where are we in terms of public resources to support this outsized government? Where are we with regard to all the things that we said devolution would do? We actually said that devolution would also herald the era of an emasculated president that would be fundamentally weaker than President Kibaki, President Moi, and President Mzee Kenyatta. That doesn't seem to have happened. We are now back to the same conversation where we're saying the president is too powerful. And we now want to kind of erode those powers and distribute those powers to other constitutional offices. And I think that derails the conversation. Yeah. We also stuck with the conversation about the sticker price on this constitution. It is hugely expensive. We are replicating government 47 times, okay? And that has huge implications on our resources. We have devolution that creates an inordinate number of representatives for every Kenyan, if you think about it that way. Are we getting the bang on the buck that we're spending in terms of services for the citizens? So I think what we need to rise up to is that time-tested role of the media to inform, to educate, and enlighten, but also to raise a fundamental core inside ourselves, a conscience. But that's now being something that we are relegating to the Twitteratis and Kenyans on Twitter and all these bloggers who basically break and run away with these things and peddle all kinds of falsehoods and even some of the tangential interpretations, such as the one that Kipchumba was talking about with regard to the creation of the cabinet committee to coordinate government programs. Yeah. So I think we really have to go back. And what I'm decrying here is the media chasing the dollars at the expense of the cardinal cardinal elements of the craft of journalism?
Oh, right. Then to you, Koki.
I was telling my students today they're very lucky that if you ask them a question, Google is available. So the media is lucky. You have sources. They may be online, they may be offline. You have so many sources to give you that breaking view of a particular story. And what I've heard from the comments from the public, they're in support of what the media is doing. That means that the common mwananchi has a mind of his own. It's no longer about followers, with low self-esteem. These are young boys. I saw a few young boys saying, oh, media, just do what you need to do. The role of verification that the media has will never die. We will always look up to the media to verify. Yes. But if we don't take that role as seriously as we should, then we fail. Because we have the opportunity to get all these sources of information and, look through it and verify that it works for them. The political agenda, the political back and forth and the conflict kind of frame is getting redundant. So media has to think about what different stories will you tell us about mundane, boring stuff like that charge sheet that has 19 people. What is the implication? So media needs to really, really think about what can we do to raise conscience more.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for those thoughts. Macharia, your article tomorrow is out. People can expect it?
Yes, it should be out by now.
Yes.
You can look at it.
And it's going to be on something related to this?
Something related to the building bridges on that first anniversary.
And I did that deliberately, so check it out tomorrow in your Daily Nation. Of course, he'll also post it on his account in a few minutes as we walk out. We're way past our time, but I thank you for your patience and your contribution to this conversation, to Kokio Cheng, and greetings to your students. I'm sure they're watching as well, and to Dr. Alex Awiti. Thank you as well for the time that you've given us, and Bwana Kipchumba also for the time you've given us. I don't know whether to say we can expect an article or a case in court for you, so
both.
Thank you for your time with us, and keep following keep reading all the stories that we do. You probably just select some of the ones that you want to see, but we do quite a good job. Not just here at Daily Nation. But and thank you, Masharia, for your time as well. Thank you for watching, to the team that's made this possible, those who are here in studio, those who are online, making the conversation go on, even as we sign off here. Thank you for watching. Good night.